They say memory is a sieve, leaking the water of the past until only the stones remain, but I do not find this to be true. My memory is not a sieve. It is a cellar dark and packed with things that have not seen the sun in decades, yet they have not rotted. They have only grown cold. I can still feel the temperature of that mud on my hands. It was a gray, lifeless clay, the kind that does not crumble when you rub it between your thumb and forefinger, but smears like grease. It had worked its way into the fissures of my skin, outlining my lifeline in filth, caking beneath fingernails that had once known only the clean, honest dirt of an Umbrian vineyard. I was shoring up the northern wall of a foxhole on the Gothic line, driving a rot-softened plank into the weeping earth with the heel of my palm. The timber was slick with moisture, sweating in the damp dark of the dugout. We were moles burrowing into the spine of the Apennines, hiding from the metal rain the Americans sent from the valleys below. But a mole belongs in the dark. I did not. Back in Orvieto, the soil was different. It was alive. In late September, before the rains came to drown the valley, the earth on my father's farm was warm to the touch, retaining the heat of the sun long after the light had failed. You could plunge your hands into it and feel the vibration of roots drinking, the teeming, microscopic life that turned death into grapes and wheat. It smelled of yeast and dry grass. Here, 300 kilometers north and a lifetime away, the earth smelled of wet wool, ammonia, and the copper tang of old blood. It was heavy, suffocating stuff. It did not want to nurture us. It wanted to swallow us. I paused in my work, my breath pluming in the frigid air. The dugout was cramped, a coffin built for two, though I was alone for the moment. My partner, a boy from Naples who cried in his sleep, had gone to the latrines. The silence of the mountains was a deception. Underneath the wind hissing through the pines, there was a low-frequency tremble, a constant shudder in the floor of the trench. The artillery was miles away, pounding the lower slopes, but the ground carried the message. A sudden, sharp vibration dislodged a clod of earth from the ceiling of the dugout. It struck my shoulder, heavy and wet. I froze. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A trapped bird desperate for the sky. I stared up at the timber roof, at the heavy sacks of sand groaning under the weight of the mountain. This was the fear that ate at me, the terror that made my bowels turn to water. It was not the bullet or the bayonet that haunted my dreams. It was the weight, the crushing, suffocating embrace of the soil closing in, filling my mouth, pressing my eyelids shut, turning me into just another layer of sediment in the geology of the war. I was a farmer who could no longer trust the land. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my forehead against the cold mud of the wall, whispering a prayer to a God I wasn't sure was listening anymore. I prayed for the open sky. I prayed for the flat, boring plains where you could see the horizon. I prayed to be anywhere but inside this tomb. Light spilled into the dugout, harsh and gray, breaking my paralysis. Lieutenant Rossi ducked inside, bringing with him a gust of icy wind and the smell of stale tobacco. He was a young man, too young to have the lines that bracketed his mouth, with the fanaticism of the desperate burning in his eyes. He didn't look at me, didn't see the terror I was hastily wiping from my face. He just unfolded a map on an ammunition crate, the paper stained with water and grease. "Pack your kit, Ferrari," he said, his voice raspy from the damp. "We're moving out within the hour." I looked at the map. It was a mess of contour lines and hastily drawn red circles. The topography of disaster. "Moving, retreating, reinforcing," he corrected sharply, his finger stabbing at a location north of us. "The Americans are pushing hard against the center. We are plugging the gap at the Futa Pass." The name hit me like a physical blow, a jolt of ice water injected directly into my veins. I leaned forward, forgetting my rank, forgetting the war, my eyes tracing the familiar curve of the contour lines near his finger. I knew those ridges. I knew the way the river snake-ticked through that particular valley. I knew how the morning mist clung to the hollows there. "The Futa Pass," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "You have a problem with the orders, sapper?" Rossi asked, his eyes narrowing. I shook my head, mute. I couldn't tell him. I couldn't explain that he was pointing to the hills that loomed over my childhood. that the red line of the front was being drawn across the very fields where I had learned to walk. The war wasn't just near my home anymore. It was coming to burn it down. "Good," Rossi snapped, rolling up the map. "Be ready." He ducked back out, leaving me alone with the shifting earth. I looked at my hands, still caked in the gray clay of the Gothic line, and realized with a sickening clarity that I was about to carry this filth home. Thung, thung, safe please, please. I am your son. But the earth did not care. It shook and heaved, churning the dead and the living together into a single, bloody compost. Then, as quickly as it had started, the thunder stopped. The ringing in my ears was a high, piercing scream. I coughed, spitting out grit. I was half buried, my legs trapped under a mound of churned clay. I pulled myself free, gasping, my fingernails tearing at the roots of the grass. The mist was gone, burned away by the heat of the explosions. The field was a cratered ruin. The olive tree was gone. The wall was gone. The Americans were gone, retreated, or buried. I did not know. I crawled back to our lines on my hands and knees. A creature of the mud. I tumbled into the trench and lay there, staring at the sky. It was blue. Indifferent. Beautiful blue. Captain Donati looked down at me. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He didn't ask about the minefield. He simply nodded, satisfied that the attack had been repelled, and walked away to check the machine guns. I looked at my hands. They were black with soil, the dirt impacted under the nails, ground into the calluses. I rubbed them together, spitting on them, trying to scrub it away. But it was no use. The land was part of me now, in a way it had never been when I was a farmer. The scene dissolves. The mud dries and flakes away, turning to dust. The years fall away like autumn leaves. I am an old man now. The uniform is gone, replaced by a wool sweater and corduroys. I am standing in the same field. It is green again. The olive tree has been replanted. It is young, slender, hopeful. The wall has been rebuilt, though the stones are different. I reach down and scoop up a handful of earth. It is warm, dry, crumbly. Good soil. Soil for wheat, for vines, for life. But I cannot feel the warmth. When I touch the ground, I do not feel the potential for harvest. I feel the cold steel waiting beneath. I feel the tension of a tripwire. I feel the vibration of the bayonet hitting the casing. I let the dirt run through my fingers. It falls back to the ground, innocent and clean. But I am not. I survived the war, yes, but I did not come home. The man who came home is a ghost who walks lightly, afraid that his own footsteps will trigger the end of the world. The harvest is ruined, not because the land is poisoned, but because the farmer is broken. I look at this field and I do not see crops. I see a cemetery where I buried my innocence. We leave the battlefields, but we never truly come home. A part of us is always there, buried, waiting. This memory is a shard of glass I carry. Help me pull it out. Subscribe to keep this history alive.